Welcome back to Friday Night Spotlight, brought to you by Jones Ford Buick GMC, your hometown dealer for more than 50 years. I am Brian Wright, and I am joined by Maria Vasquez, and we are joining you again remotely this week, as it looks like we're probably going to continue to do for the foreseeable future. So let's get right to our Week 7 talk, which is going to start with our game of the week, and that is Combs going on the road to Poston Butte. And for Combs, this is, they've only played 4 games this year due to COVID of their contests. They're 2-2 on the season. You need to get to 5 games minimum to qualify for the playoffs. So fortunately for Combs, this will be game number 5, and we'll put them in that category. Poston Butte is now 5-1. They were 5-0, but they had an upset loss to Peoria last week, 28-22. So, Maria, when you take a look at these two teams, what are your thoughts?
So starting off with Combs, it's sophomore quarterback Tanner Hale. During last week's game against Gilbert, he did a pretty good job given he's a first-year varsity starter. 10 of 25 passing, 154 yards, 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions. Now, he really struggled with his running game. He's a really good quarterback of being out of the pocket and extending the plays. But last week he had 13 carries for negative yardage and 4 fumbles. Now against a Wilson Butte defense, this is going to prove costly if it happens again.
Yeah, and speaking of Combs' offense, like you said, they did not get the kind of performance they needed out of their quarterback last week. Really the only thing they were able to do was Joey Jensen was able to game on the ground. Certainly not the all-star kind of performance that you would expect from Joey Jensen, but still 81 yards rushing and a touchdown. And I will mention as well that Combs wide receiver Lucas Koravu had 3 catches for 54 yards, so he was effective. But they're just going to need a lot more out of their offense against the Broncos, who, as we know, have a devastating rushing attack with Zion Burns and their quarterback Gavin Lloyd. But when you look at Poston Butte, Maria, like we mentioned earlier, they are no longer undefeated, and I think they were probably surprised to lose to Peoria last week. So, what do you see for them, kind of coming back, this week?
Well, you mentioned him, Zion Burns. He's been their pretty much lead attacker all season. Last week he had 28 carries for 160 yards, and the big thing here is he had no touchdowns. Now, pretty much all of the previous games this season, he's had at least 2 touchdowns in every game. So, looking at this game and potential playoff picture for the Broncos is if something happens to Zion Burns, he has an off night, or they're facing a really good defense, who can help? Who can step up and help him out?
Yeah, and you mentioned the no touchdowns, and what's interesting about that is that Zion Burns had a very uncharacteristic fumble that he lost, which was actually recovered by the Panthers on the 1-yard line. So certainly not Zion's best game. But I look at the Broncos, and their defense has been so good all year. They did not allow more than 15 points to any team all year until last week. They gave up 28 points to Peoria, and actually they gave up 22 of those 28 points in the second half, which they were outscored 22-0 in the second half. So I'm looking for the Broncos defense to really get back on track here and to have a much better performance. What are your final thoughts on this matchup?
I agree with you. I think it's going to come down to both defenses. For the Coyotes, last week they had 7 sacks. Brody Tucker and Mason Brockman, both of them had 2 sacks each. And then their top 2 leading tacklers are Taniela Taunima and Jace Judd. I'm looking to these 4 guys to be to make a big impact for the Coyotes on defense.
And I do think what helps the Combs defense is that their problems last week where they got burned by Gilbert's quarterback, Gavin Goulet, who threw for 290 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's not what Poston Butte does. Poston Butte is a power running team. so they are not going to throw the ball all over the yard. So I think that Combs will be a little bit better prepared to defend the run, as opposed to how they were kind of gashed by the Gilbert passing attack last week. That does it for our breakdown on the game of the week, and enjoy the game on Friday night. Okay, we are going to transition to the picks portion of our program. And so we're looking at week 7. And let's start with a Thursday game, which is going to be Casa Grande going on the road to Mesa Dobson. And I'm covering that game, so I do not have a pick.
And I am going to go with CG Union. They had an off week last week. They had a game scheduled against Benjamin Franklin that got canceled. So I expect the Cougars to be well rested. And Dobson might be a couple conferences above them, but they've been struggling this year. And I think the Cougar defense, they're going to have a really good night against a struggling Dobson offense. And our next game is the game of the week, and I am going to go with the Broncos. I think the past 2 weeks, both the offense and defense have gotten a little bit lackadaisical. I expect them to have a much better showing because it's good that they're struggling right now and not when the games count that it's the postseason. But if I'm Dame Thompson, I'm a little bit worried about what I'm seeing from my team right now.
Yeah, so Combs and Poston Butte, great Santan Valley rivalry. I am going to be covering this game, so I do not have a pick in that one either. Now, let's go to Maricopa. They're going to hit the road and play Gilbert. And, if you would have asked me about this game last week, I would have said, Gilbert in a landslide here. Now, Maricopa looks like they're as close to 100% as they're going to be. So that gives the Rams, I think, a fighting chance in this game. However, I look at what Gilbert did last week to Combs. Their quarterback, Gavin Goulet, threw for 290 yards and 5 touchdowns. And I think he could give the Rams some problems in this game. So I'm going to take Gilbert.
I'm also taking Gilbert. So their quarterback, Gavin Goulet, he recently took over the starting job, and through 2 games, he already has over 600 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions. Maricopa, all the past teams, the different changes they've had, this is going to be kind of like their second week, pretty much just coming back together and everything. I think it's going to be a tough task to go up against Gilbert. Our next game is Coolidge traveling to Christian. Now, last week Coolidge was without a big chunk of their playmakers, which includes Jacob Gunter and Greg Rodriguez. Now, they're going to be without these guys again this week. And the only bright side here is that whatever team coach Roger Shanks put out there, hey, they're going to have a whole week to practice. But besides that, I have to go with Gilbert Christian.
Yeah, and our Coolidge reporter, Joey Chenoweth, he told me that this could be like a kind of win and get in kind of game for postseason. And if you lose, maybe you're out. So it's a huge game. But as Maria mentioned, you have several starters for Coolidge who are not going to be available due to COVID-19 protocol. And that makes this a very, very tough challenge for the Bears. So I think I'm going to take Gilbert Christian in this one. I think it's just going to be very difficult to win such a big game without several key players. Next, we got Vista Grande going on the road to Lake Havasu. And, I was really surprised to see Vista Grande get blown out by Willow Canyon last week. I thought that would be a more competitive game. It was not competitive at all. And, I saw Lake Havasu earlier this year against Casa Grande, and Casa Grande blew them out, but we all know how good Casa Grande is. Lake Havasu does have an athletic quarterback who can make some plays. I'm going to take Lake Havasu.
I'm also taking Lake Havasu. In addition to their quarterback, Donnie Fitzgerald, they also have a fantastic sophomore running back in Isaac Stopke. He already has over 700 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns. It's a long trip for the Spartans, and it's going to be a long trip back. After the game they're going to have out there. Our next game is Sequoia Pathway hosting Welton Antelope. Now, last week, Sequoia Pathway was without two of their key players in Isaiah Stewart and Andre Smith, who were serving a 1 game suspension. And the guy who stepped up big time for them was Trey Lacey. He had over 225 total yards of offense, 3 touchdowns, and he also had 1 interception on defense. So I'm taking the Pumas.
Yeah, and I think that Sequoia Pathway would probably be favored to win that game even without those starters that you mentioned. But if they are getting those guys back, then I think the Pumas just have too much talent for Antelope. So I'm gonna take Sequoia Pathway in that game. Next, we have Florence going on the road to Tucson Pusch Ridge, and boy, it's been a rough go for Florence. They had several games earlier this year where they got leads, and they were not able to hold on to those leads. They lost to Safford last week, and Pusch Ridge, meanwhile, is the number 2 ranked team in 3A according to Max Preps. So I think this is going to be, speaking of rough road trips, I think this is going to be a rough road trip for the Gophers, and I'm taking Pusch Ridge.
I'm also taking Pusch Ridge. Their top defender is a sophomore in Tyler Mustang. So far, he already has 5.5 sacks, and given Florence struggles to close out games, go with Pusch Ridge. And our next game is Santan Foothills traveling to Mesa Eastmark. So for Foothills, I kind of thought this would have been a breakout year for junior quarterback Brett Lincoln, but he struggled a bit. And, a big reason for that is every year he's had a different coach. So, there hasn't been really any direction for the program. And, as long as no stability in the coaching position, I have to bet against Santan Foothills, and I'm taking Eastmark.
Yeah, and I was going to kind of give a default win here to the SaberCats. When I looked at Eastmark, first year in the AIA, brand new program, and they really struggled to score in their first few games. And then last week, somehow they put up 40 points on Gilbert Christian, even though they did lose that game. But, I'm looking at their ability to put up 40 points, which is something that Santan Foothills has not gotten close to scoring 40 points all year long. So I'm going to take Mesa Eastmark as well. Then we have ALA Ironwood hosting ALA Gilbert North. And one of these ALA teams is much, much better than the other. And that is going to be Gilbert North, who just blew out Coolidge last week. And, Ironwood is still struggling and still winless. So it is too tall of a task for Ironwood here, and ALA Gilbert North is going to win this one.
Yeah, I'm also going with ALA Gilbert North, although I do have to give a bit of credit to the Warriors. The past couple of games, they've managed to put some points up on the scoreboard. So, looking at these, that might be kind of going in the right direction, but they still have a long ways to go. So I'm taking Gilbert North. Our next scheduled game would have been Santa Cruz traveling to Chandler Prep, but this game is no longer being played, and as of right now, it looks like Santa Cruz will just have a bye week.
And similarly, the other game that we had scheduled this week was going to be AJ hosting Tempe, and due to COVID protocol, Apache Junction is in quarantine. Didn't play last week, not going to play this week, so no game there for the Prospectors. That does it for our picks. Remember to visit PinalCentral.com for all of your Pinal County football action, and we will see you next week.